This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Summer's almost out and fall's calling. Luckily, Nordstrom has everything you need for the season ahead, all under $100. Discover new arrivals from your favorite brands like Mango, Princess Polly, Wave, Free People, BDG, and more. Whether you're planning a last-minute getaway, heading back to class, or refreshing your office looks, you'll find the latest trends and beauty must-haves without breaking your budget. It's easy, too, with free shipping, free returns, and in-store order pickup. Shop today, in stores, and at Nordstrom.com.
This episode is brought to you by Espolón Tequila. Slow, sticky, snoozy. They call these the dog days of summer. But Espolón? They don't do boring. Welcome to the Mark days. Espolón Tequila. 100% blue Weber agave, born to shake up your summer. Just add lime, agave, and a little attitude. Visit EspolónTequila.com. Espolón Tequila, 40% alcohol, volume 80 proof. Copyright 2025 Campari America, New York, New York. Drink responsibly.
The Judge Jeanine Pirro, Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday Morning Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Happy Sunday, everybody. Boy, this summer is going by fast. I mean, in 4 weeks, you will have Sunday football. I mean, that's just crazy to me, but it's an early Labor Day this year. September 1st, I believe, is the first Monday of September. Therefore, that's Labor Day, and everybody goes back to school. A couple days later, my kids go, and we're in fall. So that's that. So I hope you had a great summer, and thanks for tuning in today. So, normally in these situations, you don't want to talk about the so-called competition, but Howard Stern, who I was the biggest fan of in the 1990s and 2000s. Private Parts is one of the better movies you'll ever see about the rise of somebody who didn't have a lot of talent and just became this person that people gravitated to. And because of his candor, his ability to conduct an interview, which, at a time was, the best in the business. Like, I'm talking TV, radio, does not matter. He got people to reveal things about themselves that they otherwise would never do with anybody else because the conversation was just that. It was conversational. Well, apparently it sounds like that SiriusXM is not going to renew his next contract, and he is done. And I mean, if you told me this back when I was a fan, I'd say, no way, this guy can work until he's dead, basically. Like, he'll never retire because everybody loves him so much. He became, I can't even put it any other way, a freak over the last couple of years, particularly during the Trump era. He became the exact elitist that he always railed against, the Hollywood celebrity full of himself who can't stop making himself the story and just feels he's above everybody else, pious, condescending. That's who Howard Stern became. And during COVID, I mean, he was absolutely, and this is where I quit. I used to listen every morning, trust me, when he was on K-Rock in New York City, 92.3, even before that on WNBC. He was absolutely must-listen-to radio. And then during COVID, he literally would humiliate and lambaste his wife for going to dinner with her friends. Now, she's about 20 years younger than Howard, Beth is. And this, I'm not talking like the first couple of months of COVID when everybody was locked down, didn't quite know what we were dealing with. No, we're talking like 3 years in, she would go out with her friends, and he would go on the air and basically say, you're going to bring back this disease. It's going to kill me. How could you do this to me? I don't know how she stayed with him, quite frankly. But that was that. And the fact that he would have on a Hillary Clinton or a Kamala Harris and just kiss their butt. Like MSNBC would even say, hey, aren't you laying it on a little bit thick? But that's how it went with Howard, and now he's gone. And it just shows you this shift now. Colbert, obviously a late-night therapy session for Democrats. 161 Democrats on his show last year. One Republican. And the one Republican, Liz Cheney. Not exactly what anybody would consider a Republican when you're campaigning with Kamala Harris. And now Howard is gone as well. We see the Sydney Sweeney controversy, which is utterly ridiculous. In its, I guess, third week now. It keeps going. It's incredible. An attractive white woman, actress, model, simply says, I have good genes and I wear good genes, and she has good genes, obviously, from her parents, because how do you look like that otherwise? And that's considered Nazi propaganda, and everybody turned on the critics of Sydney Sweeney. Colbert, obviously a very distant second to Greg Gutfeld, who went on Jimmy Fallon this week. It's a must-watch interview. You got to see the clips from that. It reminded me of the old days of like Rickles going on Carson and them actually having fun, you know. Then you see Colbert this week, and he's got Robert Reich, the former labor secretary for Bill Clinton, talking about policy, and you just literally, you'll fall asleep watching this. I mean, it's that boring. So that's where we are at this point. That's what we have, where Howard is going to go bye-bye, and rightly so, because his show has become completely unlistenable. And he even said just last week that anybody who's a Trump supporter, he doesn't want listening to his show anymore. Just like Jimmy Kimmel said the same exact thing. Like, if you support Trump, then I don't know you're watching my show. You guys understand this is a business, right? You can't tell half your audience, more than half your audience, don't listen to me anymore because I disagree with the way you voted. It's just so, I'll use the word again, pious. But that's who Howard became. Colbert has been that for years. He's gone in May. I say fire him now because there's no point in losing $40 million a year to watch Bernie Sanders talk about fighting the oligarchy. It's utterly ridiculous. Anyway, this is Joe Concha. This is the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation show. Back with more, including our first guest, Paul Mauro, Fox News. You're going to stick around for that in just a moment.
The Judge Jeanine Pirro Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday morning show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Judge Jeanine Pirro Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday morning show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Now, here's Paul Mauro. He is a Fox News contributor, focuses on law enforcement, legal, intelligence issues. He is all over the place on our wonderful top-rated network. Also, the founder of opsdesk.org. You can find his latest podcasts and articles there. Paul, thanks for joining us from the great state of Maine. How is it up there?
Nice and cool, beautiful, like a step back in time. I love this place.
Right, sounds like it. I got to get there sometime. I was going through states I've been to with my kids. They want to know how many states I've been to, and Maine notably stood out as like the only Northeast state that I haven't been to. So definitely going to head up there for vacation next year. Do want to talk about another probably cool place, and that is Russia, of course. And you have some new information as far as Russiagate. Obviously, we see Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, dropping all these bombs of evidence, media's ignoring it, of course, around Comey and McCabe and James Clapper and John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, and obviously Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, all these people that basically manipulated intelligence to make Donald Trump look like he was a Russia agent before the election, then obviously afterwards as well, that hounded his first presidency, the first term, for 3 years. So tell us who Kevin Kleinsmith is, because that is someone that you've brought up recently as far as a major player here.
Yeah, so Kleinsmith is, to me, a very important player in this case because he's the only person in the entire panoply of accused who is actually convicted of a crime relative to what went on. So in as much as you can summarize a sprawling conspiracy like this, what occurred was that Kleinsmith was the line FBI lawyer who worked on the FISA warrant, that is the national security wiretap, that was put in place by this crew of Strzok and Page and the whole gang on Carter Page, who was working for the Trump campaign at the time in 2016. And that was their entree into the Trump campaign. And from there, we ended up getting the entire sprawling Crossfire Hurricane conspiracy / investigation. And so to me, that was really the linchpin. And what Kleinsmith did in order to strengthen the application, in addition to using the bogus Steele dossier as a foundation for that wiretap, he literally went in and changed the wording of a CIA document to make it look like Carter Page was working with the Russians as a spy against America, when in fact, what had happened was the Russians had poked Carter Page to see if he could be an agent for them, and Carter Page did the right thing. He went right to the American government and told the CIA, I'm getting poked by the Russians here relative to being a flip. And, you should know about that. Well, that's what the CIA provided to the FBI. The lawyer, Kleinsmith, took out the wording that said he's not a source. That's what it said.
Wow.
That he's not a source for the FBI, for the Russians. He removed that and ended up getting prosecuted for it. He got a plea deal, didn't go to jail, lost his law license, got it back. He really didn't take much of a hit. But the point is, not only is he convicted of something, that application that he shepherded up the chain had to be approved up the chain all the way to the Comey level, because you were essentially wiretapping the Republican nominee for president at the time. Yeah. So, of course, that had to get approved at the top levels. Kleinsmith is the person who can tell you who approved it.
That is remarkable, and we're talking to Paul Mauro, Fox News contributor. So where do you see this going? Because what I've said on the air, and I'll repeat it here, is that the media either poo-poos any of this or they don't cover it at all. And it seems like if there isn't the coverage that this deserves, that this will probably be the type of situation like it was with Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, as far as all of those shell accounts and shell companies and money being funneled to the Bidens from, shady deals in Ukraine and China, and then nothing happens, right? Do you see this ultimately being something where we see, obviously, there should be accountability, but ultimately nothing happens?
You put your finger right on it, Joe, and that's why you are where you are, because that is what everybody's wondering, and that is the real linchpin here. That's really the question. And I actually do think we got a good chance this time of seeing some real activity, and here's why. I'm going to take the Trump administration at its word that there is a grand jury impaneled. Now, where it is has gotten very murky. There was strong reporting that it was in Florida. And then there was some pushback over the next couple of days about whether or not it is, in fact, in Florida. This is why this matters. The grand jury is chosen from the jury pool in that area. If the grand jury is in Florida, and according to the reporting that I saw, it was likely would have been in the Mar-a-Lago area, because I would imagine that what they tried to do is hook it to something relative to Trump's residence down there. Either the search warrant that was executed on his home, God knows what they did there. And Bongino, you can see that he's appalled by everything he's discovering. So if I were to find out that they bugged Mar-a-Lago or flipped one of the gardeners or something at the time and treated Donald Trump as a genuine Russian spy, none of it would surprise me. So this is the battle right now for the grand jury. If the grand jury is in effect and does come back with indictments, there's no way to cover it up, because there's going to be a trial if nobody flips. And the targets, as you know, are potentially Brennan, Comey, maybe even Hillary, and maybe all the way up to Obama going into the grand jury. I don't see Obama being prosecuted. But Obama's in a very tough spot, because Obama can't take the fifth because of the immunity that Donald Trump won at SCOTUS.
That's a great point.
Because of the SCOTUS decision, he can't he can't say, well, I have to take the fifth, because he's got blanket immunity. And what it means is, you got to remember, the grand jury minutes are secret. He won't know what other people have said in the grand jury. So he's got to tell the truth. So Obama in the grand jury is a landmine for this entire thing. It could really detonate, but it really matters in my mind where that grand jury is impaneled. The battle for what you're talking about, some accountability, is happening now, not down the range when we have the trials. It's now for the venue, because if the venue ends up being Washington, D.C., they are going to get such a soft ride. I wouldn't be surprised if there are no indictments, because it's 99% blue. And then as a result, the left is going to claim that the whole thing was a witch hunt, which very clearly it's not.
It's just amazing that depending on where you have a trial is whether we get justice or not. But yeah, Florida versus D.C., that seems to be the whole ball game here. And we're talking to Paul Mauro. Paul, I'm curious your thoughts on big story this week, obviously, redistricting that we're seeing in Texas. And then we see Democrats flee for Illinois, which is the most ridiculously redistricted state you'll ever see if you look at a map and the way it's drawn up. And obviously, we've seen this movie before where Texas Democrats fled to New York in 2021. and obviously ultimately got some media sympathy, but lost that battle. So now we're seeing Gavin Newsom, for example, saying, okay, well, I'm going to redistrict California too, when there's really not much to redistrict there at this point. And then New York says the same thing. And then a bunch of red states say the same thing. I mean, that appears to be where we're going at this point. We're just, depending on whether you're red or blue, will depend on what your congressional districts look like in this battle when there's a 3-seat margin, I think, in Congress now at this point. And obviously who controls the House controls impeachment hearings of Donald Trump or lack thereof. So what are your thoughts on all this? Because we've gone into silly territory at this point.
Yeah, we really have. And look, there's a SCOTUS case that's pending that they've accepted certiorari for, wherein the challenge is to redistricting on racial grounds, which I think is going to be struck down, and that's going to be the rock thrown into the pool that's going to ripple all over the place, because as we're having this gerrymandering battle at the state level, I have a feeling that at some point in 2026 or late this year, SCOTUS is going to upend the entire ball of wax here, to mix metaphors, and it's going to, I think, change the entire calculus. I don't know what that's going to look like when SCOTUS comes down with that decision, and there has to be a rush to redistrict along new lines in the same year that we have a midterm election. But taking that off the table, look, this is one of those things where the left just beats the right. The left has just been on this. They lawyer the heck out of it. And if you read, I've been reading Steve Hilton's new book, Califailure, about California, and the whole first part of the book he dedicates to how California has completely rigged the game against conservatives, that California is actually redder than people realize. It may still be a blue state, sure, but the right has like no representation in California, despite there being something like 40% of the population being conservative. So this is a rigged game that the left has very quietly played. In my mind, there's two places that they really beat the right. And to me, the center, they beat the moderates. They really just beat us all. And it is in the gerrymandering, which has been going on for a long time, that's just quietly under the table. And then the movement of money in the NGOs and the super PACs, because the ecosystem of dark money on the left is at such a point that money originating in Shanghai these days comes into the New York mayoral race. And that's another interview, but that's demonstrable. And the way it moves around is incomprehensible. The web of money movement, it just can't be tracked. They're just very, very good at this stuff. They keep it quiet. They've been doing it a long time. And frankly, it took Donald Trump to call BS and get people to man up and start looking at some of this stuff for us to finally wake up to the fact that the game has been rigged. As you say, the blue states can't be gerrymandered any further. Certainly California can't, so it's an empty threat. And I applaud the idea that we should have a snap census. I don't know if it's going to be constitutional. It's going to be challenged. But the idea that migrants who can't vote, who are by law not allowed to vote, who are illegal, are being counted in how we apportion our representatives who represent the voters is obviously internally consistent. But again, something that they have very quietly put in place that undermines the entire system.
It is remarkable that we have illegals being counted in our census. There should be a snap census. If the Supreme Court has to rule on that for whatever reason, I'm not a lawyer, I would think that they would agree. Most Americans, sane and sober anyway, would agree as well. And Paul, they're telling me that I got to go here. I've got to wrap, so I'll let you get back to your wonderful vacation up in Maine, and I will see you in a green room at Fox soon.
Always great, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate it. He's great, isn't he, guys? That's Paul Mauro, Fox News. Ops Desk is where you want to go to read all of Paul's articles and see his commentary, obviously. opsdesk.org is the website. This is Joe Concha. This is the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Foundation Show. Back with more in just a moment.
The Judge Jeanine Pirro Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday Morning Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Judge Jeanine Pirro Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday Morning Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's bring in our next VIP guest. He is the CEO of Stagwell Incorporated, was once the executive vice president of strategy over at Microsoft and obviously past advisor to President Clinton and Hillary Clinton, and the author of Microtrends. It is Mark Penn joining the show right now. Mark, thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday.
Great to talk to you.
Absolutely. So what do you see right now? And I know it's a long way out. It's August of 2025, November 2026. We have the midterms coming. It seems that I want to say that it's based on the economy, stupid, to quote someone you worked with in terms of James Carville as far as the way elections go. But Joe Biden presided over a pretty bad economy in 2022, and Republicans did not get the wave that they were hoping for. So in terms of your crystal ball, where do you see the midterms going right now in terms of will we have a Speaker Hakeem Jeffries and unending impeachment come January of 2027, or can Republicans hold on here as it stands right now?
Well, I ran the midterms in '98, and we had a simple slogan: progress, not partisanship. And we defied all the odds and actually gained seats while we were being impeached at the time. So, the general course of midterms is a kind of a correction from the last presidential election, but everything revolves around kind of the actual facts on the ground. And so the actual facts on the ground is we know the president's hovering, basically keeping all of those people who voted for him. So he's hovering around 47% approval. We know that the Democrats as a party have collapsed, that they've got the lowest ratings in history. We know that people feel better about the country than they felt under Biden, but they're not back to happiness. We know that their attitude towards the economy is it's improved a bit, but they're not yet. They wouldn't say that it was back to the old Trump 45 economy in terms of the way they would assess it. We know that the Democrats seem to be holding on to their vote, even though their own voters don't like them, because when you run the congressional race, it comes out pretty close. So,
amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
So the conclusion of all that is we don't know. The biggest change variable is that the Democratic image itself is the lowest that I've ever seen in recorded polling history. Okay. And so that is what presents an opportunity for Republicans.
What do you think is driving that? I mean, I'm sure it's many things. For instance, the way Democratic-run cities are collapsing, where you have a Brandon Johnson in Chicago polling it. I saw an approval rating of 6%, maybe as high as like 14%. Karen Bass not doing too much better in Los Angeles. Obviously, we have the possibility of a Zohran Mamdani being mayor of New York, literally a Democratic anti-Semitic communist, and he's up by 20 points. I've seen in some polls over Andrew Cuomo. And Eric Adams almost isn't even competing at this point. Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, maybe just not enough Republicans left in New York. So maybe that's one reason. Obviously, the Biden years were not good to Democrats, particularly when it comes to the cover-up or attempted cover-up around his cognitive decline. So what do you think the main driving factor is that Democrats are as unpopular as they are right now?
Well, I think that they're associated with inflation, open borders, cultural wars that people never really agreed with, and as having moved way over to the left. I mean, they've let the Democratic Socialists, who aren't even Democrats, become the loudest voice of the party. And so consequently, there's still like a lot of people who don't like Republicans and don't like Trump and want to put some shackles on what the Trump administration is doing. But boy, the Democratic Party itself, to mainstream Democrats, seems to, be standing for things that very few mainstream Democrats stand for, right? And so that's why the numbers can only be this low, with many Democrats being incredibly unhappy. Now, they also don't like losing, so they also, this is a country where they like winning. And so that's in there. But I also think they also believe that they were lied to about Joe Biden. They were handed Kamala Harris, that the party itself really institutionally, the institutional processes of who the nominee should be just completely broke down.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And we're talking to the CEO of the Stagwell Incorporated. That is Mark Penn, the website, markpenn.com. Do you think that Democrats may be misreading the room in terms of, we saw Elizabeth Warren in New York this week saying that the way the platform that Mamdani is running on is the platform that Democrats should embrace, basically, socialism. What works in New York, though, doesn't work in those key swing states that decide national elections like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, so on. So to your point where you say, the loudest, most extreme voices seem to get all the attention, that may not necessarily be a good thing outside of deep blue cities.
Well, look, the right has Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, but I don't think they're driving things today. Donald Trump is driving things. In the Democratic Party, aside from Fetterman being a dissenting voice, the left is driving things, and the left is coalescing around, primaries in which they've enhanced their advantage, generally having, very low turnout and activists taking more power within the party. Look, in order to win national elections, well, forget about national elections or not. As a matter of principles, to be a Democrat, you would want to stand for, having a rational immigration system that means border security. You would want to stand for expanding health care, improving education, reducing crime, and bringing the budget into some fiscal responsibility. Those are the things that the Democratic Party would have and should have, and in the past stood for. It did not stand for expropriation of property, socialism, anti-Semitism, open borders, defunding the police, all of the things that are on the Democratic Socialist website. And so until the Democratic Party shakes off the Democratic Socialists, sure, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, along with AOC, are being allowed to take over the party, and that's going to sink it.
This isn't the Bill Clinton America, that's certainly for sure, where we saw actual compromise with the other side and Newt Gingrich and a balanced budget amendment and welfare reform. The era of big government is over. Americans embrace that very much, and people forget, the 96 election was a landslide, in essence, for Bill Clinton after he made those changes and actually worked with the other side. Now it seems that Democrats don't have any interest in that. I'm curious, Mark, as far as July, when I look back at the news cycle, it was dominated, at least, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, so on, by Jeffrey Epstein and Republicans apparently revolting against Donald Trump. But when you speak to Trump supporters, they don't seem as passionate about this as it's portrayed in the media. So is that story finally beginning to fade? Because it seems like it's lost its legs at this point.
Yeah, it does seem to be fading. Look, I think one of the funniest things, I've seen two rather, I'd say humorous things in the last kind of month or so. Number one was the Democrats pretending they wanted the Epstein files to come out when they controlled them for the last 4 years. And the second is the Democrats complaining about gerrymandering when they've been gerrymandering the heck out of all the blue states to the limit of what they can.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing. And I've seen you been very vocal about this on social media as far as the hypocrisy when we see Illinois, literally the way it's drawn, where you have this line that just jumps from area to area just to make sure that a Democrat is elected there. Obviously, California, Massachusetts, New York, also gerrymandered to death. Are we headed towards a situation where red states are going to gerrymander the heck out of their states, and we're going to see the same from Democrats, and it ends up being more or less a wash like that? It seems like we're going in that direction, like tit for tat.
Well, the truth is, for all the yakking about gerrymandering, generally in the last few years, it's been more or less a wash, which is when I look at the national vote for a Democrat and Republican in Congress, it is very close to the actual distribution in Congress. That's what we're really talking about, is are people's votes generally counting, and does it come out that the congressional, which after all, Congress is supposed to be frequent elections, close representation, very different from the Senate, right, in the way it was designed. And so the question is that coming? In the last election, the Republicans were kind of I wouldn't say cheated, but they were underrepresented a bit. They didn't get as many congressional seats as their vote would actually have projected. So if anything, they're slightly, the Democrats have a slight advantage in this. But, the whole problem is exaggerated in the sense that actually it comes out fairly close at the end of the day. A bigger issue is what happened with the census, which is that they did this thing with the census where they said, oh, yeah, never mind, too late, we did the official counts, so here are some new counts that would actually have moved a lot of seats into more Republican areas. It's really quite incredible.
Yeah, and what we're headed towards, and we're talking to Mark Penn, he's the CEO of the Stagwell Group, Stagwell Incorporated, I should say. We're heading now towards a situation where probably the next census, which will be done in 2030, where you'll have Florida, which used to have 25 electoral votes in 2000, for example, famously. Now, that's looking like it's going to have 32. Texas is going to gain as well. Probably Georgia and Tennessee as well will gain electoral seats, while California, New York, and Illinois, because they're losing population, probably will lose electoral votes. We could be seeing a situation now, Mark, where a Republican running for president could lose Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and it might not matter because red states are getting more electoral votes.
Well, and that's where those people who are here illegally come into play, and the blue states are counting those folks. That's where you saw Trump lay down a kind of a gauntlet here, saying, oh, well, let's do the census with citizens. But the Supreme Court has already ruled that the Constitution distributes the seats not by voters, but by people. So, of course, when you shut down the border, you're also shutting down kind of the source that I think these states were seen as a likely slowdown in representation. Of course, Texas, before they were more distributed around the country, Texas would have then been actually getting more and more seats. So each one of these things is really quite interconnected. And look, the census count, I think, from where the Republicans should have gotten seats to where they presumably will get, the higher the taxes, the fewer the people want to live there. That's pretty clear, is going to come out and be reflected in the next census.
MarkPenn.com is the website. And finally, Mark, your journey has been quite remarkable when you look at, you were the guy for Bill Clinton in terms of letting him know what the pulse of the people was. Obviously, you advised Hillary Clinton as well. Would you consider going back into political strategy for a candidate, or kind of happy what you're doing as far as polling on TV a ton, writing books, just where you've been and where you are now? What's next for Mark Penn?
Look, I enjoy. We do the Harvard Caps Harris poll, which you've come on as a presentation. We've done it every month for the last 7 years. We're going to keep doing it. And I'm happy to brief. I brief Democrats, Republicans, leaders of all types with what public opinion really is. And I think that's very important because, there are some questions that Democrats are going to like, how they're doing in the congressional horse race. Others that they're not going to like what their net favorability is, lowest in history. And then, and then there are topics and complicated things like tariffs, and people are beginning to understand, is that working? Is that not working? And so I like, in addition to kind of the role that we play, with Stagwell as CEO, as part of it, just going out there and trying to explain to everybody, what does the public really think about these complex issues, which, if they're not two-sided, we wouldn't have a divided country.
We really appreciate you joining here today, Mark. We'll see you again soon. I will see you on your presentation on the 22nd, I believe, so I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mark. And this is Joe Concha. This is the Judge Jeanine Tunnel for Towers Foundation Sunday morning show. Back with more in just a moment.
The Judge Jeanine Pirro Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday morning show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Judge Jeanine Pirro Tunnel to Towers Foundation Sunday morning show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So I wrote a column in the Washington Examiner this week, WashingtonExaminer.com, that got some attention. And I argue that Jon Stewart very well could be your 2028 Democratic nominee. And you say, oh, come on, Joe. A comedian? Who would ever do that? Well, I don't know. Ukraine? because Vladimir Zelensky is a former comedian, former reality TV guy, sounds familiar, who ends up winning the presidency of Ukraine. And then obviously I could go to Ronald Reagan as far as being an actor who became governor of California and eventually the 39th president of the United States? I believe so, yes. So why not? Why not Jon Stewart? Because, look, Stewart has shown over the years that he can make an argument. Okay, remember Crossfire? Went on there with Paul Begala and Tucker Carlson. Now, granted, this is like 20 years ago or so. And he just, I hate to say it, but he wiped the floor with them, basically saying that, the way they were debating was disingenuous. It wasn't honest debate, and that it was only meant to divide the country. And then Crossfire was gone, basically less than a couple of months later, as far as a show that went from being very successful to basically Jon Stewart in one appearance ended it. He's also done some really good work, all right, credit where credit is due, for veterans of this country and especially 9/11 responders as far as the health issues that they had, obviously going down to that site and the cancer that was caused in so many of them. He not only just wrote like a check per se or put something up on social media to say that he advocates, in this case, for more money to go towards fighting those health issues and those with cancer, those who've died as a result of simply doing, the most noble thing ever in terms of going down to 9/11 and working down there as far as like putting those fires out and rebuilding it. So many got sick and died. And Stewart literally would go down to Washington, D.C. and would advocate for more money to be spent for their families to either take care of themselves or obviously those who were still sick to get the health care and money that they deserve. And he was successful in that regard, as well as for veterans as well that came back from places like Iraq and Afghanistan and were exposed to toxins there as well. So this is somebody who, I get it that he's a liberal, and I get that he has basically made a career out of putting forward misleading clips about Republicans and then basically laughing at them. But at the same time, look, the reason why I think that Stewart has a shot is because the competition sucks so badly, right? I mean, think about this for a second. Like, who does he have to beat exactly to get that nomination? Pete Buttigieg, failed labor secretary, the guy who took 2 months off for paternity leave and didn't tell anybody about it, despite the fact that his, I guess the baby, he has a guy husband. What do we need paternity leave for? It wasn't like he went through labor or anything like that. And then obviously AOC. Is that really like the best that Democrats could put forward? Maybe, I guess. And then you think that somebody like her is going to appeal to those in purple states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, when she talks about EV mandates and banning all fracking and offshore drilling and spending trillions on the new Green New Deal. Rich, we fixed that one, okay. That is not exactly the 27 Yankees, all right, as far as like competition against Jon Stewart, including those like J.B. Pritzker, who looks like Fred Flintstone, governor of Illinois, a horribly run state. Gavin Newsom, same thing, horribly run state. California, gel and nice teeth could only get you so far. And eventually Newsom's going to have to defend his horrific record in California. I'm just going down the line here, like Cory Booker with the crazy eyes. So you tell me, is it really that far-fetched for Jon Stewart to be the Democratic nominee, considering that we kind of reward the performance aspect of politics more than anything else? Because if you put forward like a moderate, like Andy Beshear, who is the governor of Kentucky, 60% approval rating in a red state, a Democrat, he's like listening and watching paint dry. I mean, he's boring, and the media doesn't reward boring. They reward the Jasmine Crockett's of the world who say the most provocative things possible because I guess they feel that at least it's interesting and therefore it rates, even if it's the most reckless rhetoric you can imagine. So Stewart, knows media about as well as anybody. He's going to say some things that get much more attention than anybody on the left can possibly generate, including AOC. So I say Jon Stewart, Democratic nominee who ends up losing 44 states to J.D. Vance? Sure, why not? I mean, again, this is the competition This is the bench of the Democratic Party, and they would love nothing more than to put a celebrity forward. Boy, wouldn't that be fitting. This is Joe Concha. This is the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Sunday morning show. Thanks so much for tuning in today, and we will see you next Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Judge Jeanine Tunnel to Towers Sunday Morning Show. You can hear Judge Janine's Tunnel to Towers Sunday Morning Show Sunday mornings at 10. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Lowe's knows when you're looking for reliability, the right brand makes all the difference. And now, Lowe's is the exclusive home improvement retailer for the Whirlpool water treatment line, including their Wi-Fi softener, under-sink filtration system, and more. With Whirlpool's proven performance and our everyday low prices, better tasting, better quality water is within reach. Shop pro-trusted brands like Whirlpool and more, in-store or online. Lowe's, we help, you save.